Marcus Johnson stood at the entrance of Westfield University's physics department, clutching his worn leather bag tightly against his chest. The hallways gleamed with polished marble, walls adorned with portraits of famous scientists, all white men with stern expressions who seemed to stare down at him with skepticism. At 24, Marcus had already achieved more than most graduate students. Growing up in a small apartment with his mother who worked two jobs, he had studied by lamplight long after others slept. His undergraduate work at a state university had caught attention, earning him this rare opportunity at one of the country's most elite institutions. Today was his first departmental meeting. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pushed open the heavy wooden door to the conference room. The conversation inside immediately hushed. 20 pairs of eyes turned to examine him, some curious, some indifferent, a few clearly unwelcoming. "Ah, you must be the new scholarship student," Professor Harrington said from the head of the table. His voice carried no warmth. "We've already begun. Find a seat wherever you can." Marcus scanned the room. No empty chairs remained at the main table. He spotted a folding chair in the corner and quietly made his way to it, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze. "As I was saying before the interruption," Harrington continued, "theoretical physics remains a discipline that demands mathematical precision. Not everyone is equipped for such rigors." Several professors nodded in agreement, a few glancing back at Marcus with thinly veiled doubt. For the next hour, Marcus listened as research projects were discussed. Despite raising his hand several times, he was never acknowledged. When the meeting finally ended, he approached Professor Green, who had mentioned quantum entanglement, Marcus's area of specialty. "Excuse me, Professor Green. I've been working on a new approach to quantum entanglement that might interest you," Marcus said, offering his notebook. Professor Green barely glanced at the equations. "Young man, these concepts have been studied by experts for decades. I doubt there's anything new you could contribute at this stage." He walked away, joining a group of laughing colleagues. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his small campus apartment. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of his mother at his undergraduate graduation, her face beaming with pride. Next to it stood a worn chalkboard covered with complex equations. "They don't believe I belong here," he said to the empty room. "But I didn't come this far to give up now." He pulled out his research notes and began working. His theory on quantum entanglement challenged conventional thinking. If he could prove it mathematically, not even Harrington could dismiss him. Days passed as Marcus kept to himself, spending most hours in the library's far corner or his apartment. He noticed how conversations would stop when he entered rooms, how partners paired off quickly in lab sessions, leaving him to work alone. One rainy afternoon, Marcus overheard two professors talking outside his carrel in the library. "Harrington says these diversity admissions are lowering our standards," one said. "That Johnson boy seems bright enough, but is he really Westfield material?" The other laughed. "Well, Harrington's planning something for next week's seminar. Says he'll expose the gaps in the boy's understanding once and for all. Should be quite a show." Marcus's heart raced, but his resolve only strengthened. He gathered his books and headed back to his apartment. If they wanted to test him, he would be ready. More than ready, he would show them all exactly what Westfield material really looked like. The grand lecture hall of Westfield University buzzed with excitement. Today was the monthly departmental seminar where professors and doctoral candidates presented their latest research. Normally, first-year students like Marcus Johnson only watched from the audience, but an email from Department Chair Professor Harrington had changed everything. "Mr. Johnson," the message read, "since you've expressed such confidence in your quantum entanglement theory, I've added you to tomorrow's presentation schedule. 10 minutes should be sufficient. Come prepared." Marcus knew what this was, not an opportunity, but a trap. Still, he spent all night preparing his slides and rehearsing his explanation. When he entered the hall, Marcus noticed it was unusually full. Word had spread about the special presentation. Even Dean Williams from the administration sat in the back row, something that rarely happened at routine seminars. After two professors gave their presentations to polite applause, Harrington approached the podium with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Next, we have a rather unusual addition to our program. Mr. Marcus Johnson, a first-year student, believes he has discovered something revolutionary about quantum entanglement that has somehow escaped the notice of established physicists for decades. His tone made several audience members chuckle. "Mr. Johnson, please enlighten us." Marcus walked to the podium, his heart pounding but his face calm. The room seemed larger than before, the lights brighter. He connected his laptop and his first slide appeared on the screen. "Thank you for this opportunity," Marcus began. "My work suggests that quantum particles can maintain connection across greater distances than previously thought, with implications for communication and computing." He was only 2 minutes into his explanation when Professor Harrington interrupted. "Excuse me, but there's a fundamental error in your third equation." Harrington walked to the board and circled a section of Marcus's formula. "This violates basic conservation principles. Did they not teach this in your undergraduate program?" Laughter rippled through the audience. Marcus felt heat rising in his face, but kept his voice steady. "Actually, sir, if you look at the next slide." "I've seen enough," Harrington cut in. "This is precisely what happens when admission standards are compromised for other considerations." He turned to the audience. "This is why theoretical physics requires rigorous mathematical background, not just enthusiasm." Professor Green joined in, pointing to another part of Marcus's work. "And here, this approach was disproven in 1987. Perhaps you should review the basic literature before wasting department time with recycled ideas." The room grew uncomfortably quiet as several professors exchanged knowing looks. Some graduate students stared at their shoes, unwilling to witness the humiliation, but not brave enough to intervene. Marcus stood frozen at the podium, his presentation only half finished. The work he poured his heart into for months was being dismissed without a fair hearing. For a moment, he considered walking out. Then he noticed something. Professor Rees, a new faculty member, was frowning not at Marcus but at Harrington. She caught Marcus's eye and gave a slight nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Marcus looked directly at Harrington. "Professor, would you mind if I responded to your critique with a demonstration?" Harrington smirked. "By all means, though I doubt it will change the mathematical reality." Marcus pulled a small device from his bag, something he built in the lab after hours. It was crude but functional. Rather than arguing theory, Marcus said calmly, "Let me show you practical application. This simple apparatus tests my hypothesis about extended quantum entanglement." The room grew silent. Even Harrington seemed surprised by the unexpected turn. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Johnson?" Harrington asked, his voice now carrying a hint of uncertainty. "A real-time demonstration that will either prove my theory correct or confirm your criticism," Marcus replied, his hand steady as he set up the equipment. "I believe that's how science is supposed to work." The lecture hall fell completely silent as Marcus set up his small device on the demonstration table. It consisted of 2 clear boxes connected by what looked like ordinary wire, with small LED lights on each box. Professor Harrington crossed his arms, a dismissive smile still playing on his lips. Several other professors leaned forward in their seats, curiosity overcoming their earlier judgment. "This demonstration," Marcus explained, his voice gaining strength, "will show quantum entanglement over a distance of 10 meters, with no conventional signal transmission between the units." "Impossible," muttered Professor Green from the front row. "The coherence would break down." Marcus nodded respectfully. "That's what current theory suggests, Professor, but my equations predict otherwise." He turned to address the whole room. "I need a volunteer to verify there's no hidden mechanism." He looked directly at his harshest critic. Perhaps Professor Harrington would do the honors. Trapped by his own arrogance, Harrington couldn't refuse without seeming afraid. He rose slowly and approached the table, examining the device with obvious skepticism. "What am I looking for?" he asked. "Please confirm there's no transmitter, no hidden technology besides what you see," Marcus replied calmly. Harrington inspected every inch of the apparatus, even unscrewing panels that Marcus pointed out. Finding nothing suspicious, he stepped back with a frown. "Now," Marcus continued, "I'll take one box to the back of the hall while Professor Harrington keeps the other here." As Marcus walked to the rear of the lecture hall, whispers filled the room. Graduate students exchanged glances. Was this first-year student really challenging the department's most respected minds? At the back of the room, Marcus placed his box on a table. "Professor Harrington, please press the blue button on your box when I count to 3. Everyone, Watch both boxes carefully. The tension was palpable as Marcus counted. 1, 2, 3. Harrington pressed his button. Instantly, with no perceptible delay, both boxes lit up with identical patterns of flashing lights. Not just simple flashes, but complex sequences that matched perfectly despite the distance between them. Gasps filled the room. Professor Reyes stood up for a better view, her eyes wide with amazement. "That's not possible," Harrington stammered, pressing the button again. Once more, both boxes displayed identical patterns simultaneously. "According to conventional quantum theory, you're right," Marcus said, walking back to the front. "But my equations, the ones you dismissed, predicted exactly this result." He gestured to his forgotten presentation slides. "That error you identified isn't an error at all. It's a new understanding of how quantum entanglement works across distance." Dean Williams stood up from the back row. "Young man, are you saying you've achieved instantaneous communication?" Marcus shook his head. "Not quite, sir. Information still can't travel faster than light, but these entangled particles behave as one system regardless of distance, exactly as my equations predict." Professor Reyes approached the demonstration table for a closer look. "This challenges everything we've assumed about quantum coherence limitations," she said, her voice filled with genuine excitement. Harrington's face had lost its color. He stared at the device as if it had personally betrayed him. "Would anyone like to examine the mathematics behind this demonstration?" Marcus asked, pulling out his notebook filled with equations. Several professors, including Reyes, immediately moved forward. Even Green, despite his earlier dismissal, joined them. Only Harrington remained frozen in place, watching as his colleagues pored over Marcus's work with growing excitement. "This approach is completely novel," Professor Reyes announced after several minutes. "The mathematics is sound." She looked at Marcus with newfound respect. "Mr. Johnson, I believe you've made a significant breakthrough." The room erupted in conversation. Graduate students crowded forward to see the device. In the confusion, Marcus caught Dean Williams watching him with an appraising look. The humiliation plan for today had transformed into something entirely different. The unexpected emergence of a new scientific voice that could no longer be silenced. The buzz around Marcus Johnson's demonstration lingered in the physics department for days. Students who had never spoken to him now smiled in hallways. Professors who had ignored him suddenly found reasons to engage in conversation. His inbox filled with emails from faculty and students alike, requesting meetings or offering congratulations. All except Professor Harrington. 3 days after the seminar, Marcus sat alone in the campus coffee shop, reviewing notes for his upcoming classes. The excitement of his triumph had faded, replaced by quiet determination to continue his work without distraction. "Is this seat taken?" Marcus looked up to find Professor Elena Reyes standing beside his table, holding a steaming cup of coffee. Unlike other professors who approached him with newfound curiosity, her interest seemed genuine. "Please join me," Marcus replied, clearing space among his papers. Professor Reyes settled into the chair opposite him. "Your demonstration was remarkable," she said without preamble, "but I'm more interested in what comes next." Marcus tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "Breakthroughs are just beginnings, Mr. Johnson. The real work comes afterward." She took a sip of her coffee. "The department is buzzing, but buzzing doesn't build careers or advance science." For the first time since the seminar, Marcus felt uncertainty creep back in. "Professor Harrington hasn't spoken to me. I think he's trying to find flaws in my work." Reyes nodded. "Of course he is. And not just him. That's how science works. Build, test, question, rebuild." She leaned forward. "He may have been wrong about your abilities, but he's still one of the sharpest minds in quantum physics. His criticism, however motivated, will only make your work stronger." Marcus considered this perspective. "So what should I do now?" "First," Reyes said, "document everything. Write up your findings properly, with complete mathematical proofs. Second, replicate your experiment with variations to strengthen your case." She paused, studying his face. "And third, prepare for the backlash." "Backlash?" Marcus asked, though he'd already sensed it coming. "Some will question whether you had help. Others will claim your results can't be reproduced. Academia can be brutal, especially to outsiders who challenge established thinking. Her voice carried the weight of personal experience. Before Marcus could respond, the coffee shop door opened and Dean Williams entered with two men in business suits. Spotting Marcus, the dean changed direction and approached their table. "Mr. Johnson, what excellent timing. These gentlemen are from the National Science Foundation." The dean's smile seemed unnaturally wide. "They've heard about your demonstration and have some questions." Marcus and Professor Reyes exchanged glances. This level of interest from the NSF was unusual for a first-year graduate student's work. "We'd like to discuss potential applications," one of the men said, handing Marcus a business card. "Your approach to quantum entanglement has significant implications." The weight of those words hung in the air. Marcus suddenly understood. His discovery had value beyond pure science. After they arranged a future meeting and the men departed, Professor Rees gave Marcus a serious look. "This is where it gets complicated. Government interest means your work has applications beyond academia, possibly in secure communications, possibly in other areas." Marcus felt a chill. "What should I do?" "Be careful, be ethical, and don't navigate this alone." Professor Reyes pulled out her notebook and wrote something down. "Come to my lab tomorrow evening. I have equipment that might help you develop your theory further, away from prying eyes." As they parted ways, Marcus noticed Professor Harrington watching from across the coffee shop, his face unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before Harrington looked away, gathering his papers. That night in his apartment, Marcus called his mother. After telling her about his success, he asked the question weighing on his mind. "Mom, how do you know when you've started something bigger than yourself?" Her answer was simple but profound. "When others try to take it from you or tell you to stop." Marcus looked at his equations, the NSF business card, and thought about Professor Reyes's warning. His moment of triumph had opened a door, but what waited on the other side remained unknown. The basement laboratory in the physics building was nearly empty at 9 p.m. Most students had returned to their apartments, but Marcus Johnson hunched over Professor Reyes's advanced equipment, carefully adjusting settings on his improved quantum entanglement device. "Try increasing the power to the secondary coil," Professor Reyes suggested, pointing to a dial. She had been working alongside Marcus for the past week, providing both equipment and guidance. As Marcus made the adjustment, the paired quantum receivers synchronized perfectly, their patterns matching across a distance of now 50 meters, 5 times his original demonstration. "It works," Marcus exclaimed, his tired face breaking into a smile. The laboratory door suddenly opened. Marcus and Professor Reyes turned, startled to see Professor Harrington standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable as he slowly approached their workbench. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," Harrington said quietly. The janitor mentioned lights on after hours. Marcus tensed, preparing for another confrontation, but Harrington's next words surprised him. "Your original equations. May I see them again?" Cautiously, Marcus handed over his notebook. Harrington studied the pages in silence, occasionally nodding or frowning. Finally, he looked up. "Your approach is unorthodox, but I've spent the past week trying to disprove it." He paused. "I couldn't." Professor Reyes raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an admission, Richard." Harrington placed the notebook down carefully. "The National Science Foundation has been calling me about your work, Johnson. So has the Department of Defense. They rarely show interest in theoretical physics unless they see practical applications." "What kind of applications?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. "Secure communications. Possibly surveillance." Harrington's voice lowered. "They're offering substantial funding for further development, but they want to classify the research." Marcus exchanged glances with Professor Reyes. Her earlier warnings echoed in his mind. "I didn't come here for the politics," Marcus said. "I just wanted to advance our understanding of quantum mechanics." "Science is never separate from politics," Harrington replied, surprising Marcus with his candor. "Especially not discoveries like yours." An uncomfortable silence filled the lab until Harrington spoke again. "I owe you an apology, Johnson. My behavior at the seminar was unprofessional." The words clearly didn't come easily to him. Marcus nodded, accepting but not quite ready to forgive. "Why come to me now?" Marcus asked. Harrington straightened his posture. Because before I was a professor with a reputation to protect, I was a physicist who cared about the truth. Your equations represent a genuine breakthrough. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. There's a conference in Geneva next month. Invitation only. Leaders in quantum physics from around the world. I've nominated you to present your findings. Marcus stared at the folder in disbelief. Geneva? But I'm just a first-year graduate student. A first-year graduate student who just revolutionized quantum entanglement theory, Professor Reyes interjected, smiling. Harrington nodded. If you present there, your work becomes public knowledge in the scientific community. Much harder for government agencies to quietly classify or control. Marcus suddenly understood. You're helping me protect my research. I'm helping protect science, Harrington corrected. Knowledge like this belongs to humanity, not to any government or military complex. Professor Reyes looked at Harrington with newfound respect. I didn't think you'd take this position, Richard. Neither did I, he admitted. But seeing genuine innovation suppressed would betray everything I claimed to stand for as a scientist. As they discussed the Geneva conference, Marcus realized something had shifted. The professors who had tried to humiliate him now stood beside him, united by something more important than academic hierarchy or personal pride, the pursuit of knowledge and its ethical application. Later that night, updating his mother by phone, Marcus reflected on the strange turn of events. Sometimes, he told her, your biggest critics become your strongest allies when something more important is at stake. The Grand Geneva Conference Center buzzed with activity. Hundreds of the world's leading physicists gathered in small groups, speaking rapidly in various languages. Elaborate posters displaying complex equations lined the walls, while distinguished professors debated theories in hushed, intense conversations. In a quiet corner, Marcus Johnson adjusted his tie for the 5th time. His presentation was scheduled in just 30 minutes, the final talk of the day in the main hall. Stop fidgeting, Professor Reyes said kindly, handing him a bottle of water. Your work speaks for itself. What if they don't understand my approach? Marcus asked, glancing at the packed auditorium through the doorway. What if they think it's too unconventional? Professor Harrington, who had been scanning the crowd, turned to Marcus. That's precisely why we're here. Science advances when convention is challenged. His tone carried none of the dismissiveness from their first encounters. Besides, I've seen the guest list. 3 Nobel laureates want to meet you after your talk. Marcus took a deep breath. The journey from humiliated student to conference presenter had happened in just 6 weeks. His improved device, now capable of maintaining quantum entanglement over 300 meters, sat in a sealed case beside him. A conference organizer approached their group. Mr. Johnson, we're ready for your setup. As Marcus followed her to the stage, he noticed 2 men in dark suits entering the auditorium, taking seats in the back row. The government representatives had come after all, despite Harrington's efforts to keep the presentation purely academic. The massive auditorium fell silent as Marcus took the stage. 500 faces turned toward him, some curious, some skeptical, all waiting to see if the rumors about a breakthrough in quantum entanglement were true. Good afternoon, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. My name is Marcus Johnson, first-year doctoral candidate at Westfield University. A whisper rippled through the audience. First-year students rarely presented at the Geneva conference. Today I'll demonstrate how quantum entanglement can be maintained over distances previously thought impossible without degradation of the quantum state. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus explained his theory, walking the audience through the mathematics and showing video evidence of his earlier tests. The room remained unusually quiet, with none of the side conversations typical during presentations. Then came the moment of truth, the live demonstration. Professor Reyes helped set up the first quantum receiver on stage, while Professor Harrington took the second unit to the far end of the convention center, over 300 meters away. What you're about to see challenges our understanding of quantum coherence, Marcus explained. The conventional theory suggests this shouldn't work. He activated the device. Instantly, the patterns appeared on both screens, his on stage and Harrington's in the distance, visible through a live video feed displayed on the main screen. The auditorium erupted. Scientists leaped to their feet, some shouting questions, others simply staring in amazement. In the back row, the government representative scribbled notes furiously. After demonstrating several variations, Marcus concluded his presentation. This is just the beginning. The applications range from communications to computing, from medicine to materials science. But most importantly, he paused, making eye contact with the government men. This knowledge belongs to humanity, not to any single institution or nation. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. As Marcus left the stage, he was immediately surrounded by researchers eager to speak with him. Among them was Professor Yasmin Kapoor from Oxford University, one of the world's leading quantum physicists. "Young man," she said, shaking his hand firmly, "you have just changed our field forever." Later that evening, at the conference reception, Marcus found a moment of quiet near a window overlooking Geneva's lake. Professor Harrington approached, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To scientific truth," Harrington said, offering a glass. "It finds its way to the surface, even when some of us try to push it down." Marcus accepted the toast with a nod, realizing that in this moment he was no longer an outsider but a recognized voice in the scientific community, a voice that would not be silenced again. The plane touched down at Hartford International Airport on a crisp autumn afternoon. Marcus Johnson gazed out the window, watching ground crews scurry across the tarmac. 3 weeks in Geneva had changed everything, yet as the familiar landscape of New England came into view, he wondered how much had changed at Westfield University. "Ray?" Professor Reyes asked from the seat beside him. Marcus nodded, gathering his carry-on bag. Inside was a folder containing 6 different research collaboration offers from institutions around the world, along with the prestigious Lawrence Medal, an honor rarely given to someone so early in their career. The university had sent a car to collect them. As they drove through campus, Marcus noticed students pointing at their vehicle. News of his success had traveled fast. "The physics department is holding a reception for you," Professor Reyes said, checking her phone. "Apparently the president of the university will be there." Marcus smiled faintly. 3 months ago, most of them wouldn't even make eye contact with me in the hallway. "Success changes how people see you," she replied. "The question is whether you'll let it change how you see yourself." When they arrived at the physics building, Marcus was surprised to find the entire department gathered in the main lecture hall, the same room where he had been humiliated and then vindicated. Applause broke out as he entered. Dean Williams approached immediately, shaking his hand vigorously for the benefit of nearby photographers. "Marcus, our Geneva star returns." Williams beamed. "The university board is extremely impressed. We're prepared to offer you a research fellowship with your own lab space." Before Marcus could respond, he spotted a familiar face at the back of the room. His mother stood quietly watching, tears of pride shining in her eyes. Excusing himself from the dean, Marcus crossed the room and embraced her. "You came," he whispered. "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," she replied, straightening his collar. "Though I must say, all these professors suddenly singing your praises. That's quite a change from what you told me before." Marcus glanced around the room at the faculty members who now sought his attention. Professor Harrington stood apart from the celebration, observing with a complex expression. "Mom, I need a minute with someone," Marcus said. "Wait here." He made his way through the crowd to Harrington. "Quite a homecoming," Harrington commented, his voice neutral. "It feels strange," Marcus admitted. "Everyone's treating me differently." Harrington nodded slowly. "That's academia for you. Success is everything." He hesitated before continuing. "But recognition doesn't necessarily mean acceptance." "What do you mean?" "Look around this room, Johnson. Do you see any other faces that look like yours?" Harrington's question was direct but not unkind. Your genius opened a door, but the system remains unchanged. Marcus surveyed the celebration. Harrington was right. Among the faculty and graduate students, he remained the only black person besides his mother. "The dean just offered me a research fellowship," Marcus said. "Take it," Harrington replied immediately. "Use it to change things from the inside." The university president tapped a glass, calling for attention. As speeches began praising Marcus's achievement, he found himself planning something more important than his next research project. Later that evening, after the celebration ended, Marcus sat with Professor Reyes and his mother in a quiet restaurant off campus. "I've made a decision," he announced. "I'm accepting the fellowship, but with conditions. His mother raised an eyebrow. Conditions? I want to start a mentorship program for underrepresented students in physics. Full university support, not just lip service. Professor Reyes smiled. Using your new leverage wisely, I see. If my experience proves anything, Marcus said, it's that brilliance exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. I want to change that. As they discussed his plans, Marcus's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Your demonstration in Geneva was impressive. We should discuss potential applications. National Quantum Initiative. The government's interest hadn't waned. The path ahead would require navigating not just academic politics, but also powerful outside interests. Yet for the first time, Marcus felt ready for these challenges, not just as a physicist, but as someone who could open doors for others that had nearly been closed to him. 2 years passed like lightning. On a warm spring morning, Marcus Johnson stood at the front of Westfield University's largest lecture hall, which was filled beyond capacity. Students sat in the aisles, leaned against walls, and clustered near doorways. But they weren't there to see Marcus. They had come to witness the presentation of his first group of mentees. 5 undergraduate students from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in physics stood nervously at the podium. Their research, guided by Marcus's Quantum Opportunities program, had produced results that challenged conventional thinking in various areas of physics. Professor Johnson changed everything for us, explained Jasmine Torres, a brilliant sophomore from South Bronx. He showed us that our perspectives aren't just welcome in physics, they're necessary. Marcus watched from the side, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. His mother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her was Professor Reyes, now the department's associate chair, and most surprisingly, Professor Harrington, who had become an unexpected champion of Marcus's mentorship initiative. The audience included representatives from MIT, Caltech, and Stanford, all hoping to recruit Marcus's students for their graduate programs. In the back row sat 2 familiar figures in suits, government representatives who had never given up their interest in Marcus's work, though he had consistently steered his research toward public, humanitarian applications rather than classified projects. After the presentations ended to enthusiastic applause, Dean Williams approached the podium. Today marks the 2nd anniversary of what we now call the Johnson Initiative, he announced proudly. What began as one student's breakthrough has transformed into a program that has increased diversity in our physics department by 40% and produced research that has been published in 6 major journals. Marcus shook his head slightly at the irony. The same administration that had once overlooked him now claimed credit for his success. But he had learned to focus on results, not recognition. The reception afterwards spilled out onto the campus lawn. As students and faculty mingled, Professor Harrington found Marcus near the refreshment table. Your mother must be proud, Harrington said, nodding toward where she stood chatting with several students. She is, Marcus replied, though she still reminds me where I came from every chance she gets. Harrington looked thoughtful. You know, Johnson, when you first arrived, I saw you as a threat to the way things were done. And now? Now I understand you were exactly what we needed. He gestured toward the diverse group of students. Your approach to quantum entanglement was revolutionary precisely because you weren't constrained by conventional thinking. The same applies to how you've changed this department. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A woman in a wheelchair was making her way through the crowd, Dr. Catherine Chen, the newly appointed director of the National Science Foundation. She headed straight for Marcus. Dr. Johnson, I've been following your work closely. Not just your quantum research, but this program you built. Thank you, Director Chen, Marcus replied, surprised by her presence. The NSAT is launching a national initiative to transform STEM education, she explained. We want to replicate your mentorship model across the country. Would you consider heading the project? The offer was unexpected but perfectly aligned with Marcus's vision. From being an outsider in a hostile department to potentially reshaping science education nationally, the journey had come full circle. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone in his office, looking at the wall where he'd hung 2 items side by side, his original quantum entanglement equations and a group photo of his first mentorship cohort. Both represented breakthroughs, but the second meant more to him than the first. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Remember what I always told you. Marcus smiled and typed his reply. Brilliance gets attention, but compassion creates legacy. As he looked out the window at Westfield's campus, he saw not just buildings but possibilities. Doorways that were now open because he had refused to accept that they should remain closed. The quantum breakthrough had made him famous, but his true genius move had been what came after, using his position to ensure that the next generation of brilliant minds wouldn't have to shock everyone just to be seen.